Hi, my name's James O'Neill, doing this video from Cornwall, United Kingdom. It's Wednesday night. I'll probably put this video up when I get back from work tomorrow. No, it's Thursday night. Well, I'll put this video up Friday afternoon. So, I was actually going to make this video last night. And obviously I did, because when I put my computer on and I put my YouTube account on, it came up, oh, you're suspended again. Somebody complained about the video where I put the big paedophile face, that big 5-foot paedophile face that was painted down the lanes, country lanes, and I found it. I was meant to find it. Me and Peter out for a walk. We found it. Then we found another one, and then somebody told me about another one, and then somebody told me about another one. So somebody complained about that, and you think, well, why would they complain about that? You know, and that's the nature of the world we live in at this moment in time. There's a faction of society that are determined to get control, and they're going to take down anybody that is. I'm not going to say different, but I'm going to say has a level of awareness, because their aim is not just to stop me. Their aim is to stop the regular 400-500 people who watch my video. It's not just an attack on me, it's an attack on you guys. But I've got the backup channel, what say gets 200, this channel, it gets 250 views. I said it a few times that I had this channel, and you know, it is what it is. And I was thinking about it today, and the first time it happened, I got sucked in. But now it's happened a few times. I'm not getting sucked in, and it's like the people who say, "Jimmy, do a backup channel, do this, do that." Well, I've got my backup YouTube channel, and if that one gets taken, if that one gets ripped down, then I'll create another backup channel for this one. But the interesting thing is, I've come home from work today, gone on YouTube, and they've done it again. They've reported another video. So I'm now into 3 videos. One video only, one suspension only, the 3 months elapsed just a couple of weeks ago. Well, 10 days ago. So that's reduced me down to 1. But now I've had this, the paedophile video, where it's shown the face, that's made it 2 strikes now. It's like baseball, if you think of 2 strikes, I'm on 2 strikes. But I've come home from work today, and there's another video. So I'm on 3 strikes now. So technically, my YouTube channel should be taken down, my Jim 1A, 2A channel. It should be gone. So I've had to make an appeal against this other video, and it's another video that's over a year old. And it's called Sally Yates and Demonising President Trump. And it was just over a year ago I made it. And it was about Donald Trump sacking one of his DAs, or somebody, who wouldn't do as she was told. She wouldn't prosecute somebody. She was hanging back. So Donald Trump just went, well, you can go. If you're not going to do your job, if you're not going to do your duty, then you'll have to go. So she went. She was gone. And they took that down. But thinking about it today, I'm not going to be, it's not that I'm not going to be chased off. If they do what they plan to do and get me thrown off YouTube by just reporting random videos, going through me back catalogue, looking for titles. Now, how they picked that one, it might have been because I put the singer's name down. What's the name? Forgot her name in the title. But if they get me thrown off the channel, then it is what it is. I'm not running round like a fucking hare being chased by a whippet, looking for new channels, new ways to get me information out. I've got this channel. This is my backup. And if the other one goes, I'll create another backup. And if eventually Google, YouTube go, Jimmy, we know you're doing this, so we're going to have to get rid of you. You know, all your channels are going, well, that'll be what it'll be, but I can't see it getting to that. But if it does, it does. But I'm not going to worry about it. And I am not going to be that hare that is being chased by the whippet. Scared. Now, the person who's doing it, or the people who are doing it, well, God sees everything they do. And I've found throughout my life that people who've done bad things to me, or people with bad intentions, or something usually happens whereby it's a case of he's out of bounds. You know, he's going to have tough times, but you're not to give him the tough times. And also, it comes under that law of not karma, but God has this law. The evil elite show us their evil in full view. Now, this person is doing it not in full view. Well, that's against God's universal cosmic law. When you do bad things from the shadows, God has a rule against that. All this evil that's going on the planet now with politics and religion and all the other stuff, it's been done in full view. They're giving you all, they're showing you what they're doing. It's like with Fauci when Rand Paul was questioning him. That evidence is there for everyone to see that Fauci knew what was going on. It's now coming out that Fauci was getting emails keeping him up to date with the experiments in the Wuhan lab. You see, it's coming out. Now, the people who are doing all the dirty work for the evil elite, the little Joeys that Joey do this, Joey do that, well, their time will come and it'll be in God's time. So I'm not getting involved. I'm not running around trying to think, who is this person? It doesn't fucking matter. God knows. Right, so this story, this video, what I'm going to do tonight, I'm going to call it, they will never accept responsibility. It's like this person who's trying to get me off YouTube. They will not accept responsibility because they won't get in touch with me and tell me what they're doing and why they're doing it. You see, they don't accept responsibility. And we've got this whole class of politicians and religious leaders that do not accept responsibility. And we've got Ken Clark with the blood scandal. And I've talked about this blood scandal a few times over the years, about how the British government, Conservative, but Labour as well, because they carried it on, to save money that they are just printing now for all sorts of things, for COVID. They are just creating money from nothing now for their reasons, for their purpose, to enrich people. But years ago, 40 years ago, they were so fucking tight with the money that they bought blood plasma from America for haemophiliacs. And this blood plasma had been collected in America from prisoners in jails and homeless people living in back alleys, selling the blood, drinking, doing drugs, maybe full of disease, but they were going and selling their blood for drugs and alcohol. And the British government, knowing this, thought it'd be a good idea. See, this thing called due diligence. When you go and buy a car, you do due diligence on that car. You look up the Which report. You go and look at the car in the forecourt. You go and look at other cars to compare it to. So the British government will have done due diligence, and they will have known that this company was able to provide this blood plasma so cheap because they were getting it from prisoners in prisons and they were getting it from homeless people. And it was riddled with disease. It was riddled with hepatitis and AIDS. The blood plasma was riddled with AIDS and hepatitis. That's how the tennis player who won Wimbledon died, the first black player to win Wimbledon. He died of AIDS from a blood transfusion. What was his name? Somebody will put his name. So all these haemophiliac children, it was specifically mainly for the children. And a lot of these children were in a boarding school where they could all be looked after and cared for. See that word, care for. The government looking after them. And they were given blood plasmas to like boost their immune system. But it wasn't. It was giving them AIDS and hepatitis. And they all started dying off, just like the gay plague. AIDS. The gay community was shouting and screaming that it was their community that was suffering from AIDS and dying. They were taking the brunt of it. Well, so was the haemophiliac children in this country, and thousands of them died of AIDS and hepatitis. And the government would not accept responsibility, the Tory government. And that passed on to Labour because they wouldn't accept responsibility, even though it was the Tory government that had done it. They carried it on, and then they wouldn't accept responsibility. Well, it's now the chickens are coming home to roost in the last couple of years because they've been waiting for them all to die off. It's like the old folks' homes. Nobody's accepting responsibility for COVID getting in the old folks' homes when it was the government that forced people to go straight from hospital when they were still symptomatic and putting them in old folks' homes where the people were being protected technically. And the government forced the old folks' homes, the care homes, to take these people from hospital who were still symptomatic. And it's killed thousands of people in this country. It's killed thousands of people in New York alone with Como. But Como won't accept responsibility. The cock of hand, Matt Hancock, he won't accept responsibility. Javid won't. Boris won't. Nobody accepts responsibility. Well, this all started with the Tory government. And at the time, the health minister was Ken Clarke. Clarke infuriates victims with show of disdain. So he's had to give evidence and he doesn't give a shit. Now, Ken Clarke is in my book. The title, The Deafening Silence, it comes from Ken Clarke and this blood thing. Oh no, something else that he did. So I'll tell you what. So Ken Clarke, when he was health secretary, he oversaw this blood plasma and the reports were coming in. The reports were coming in 35, 40 years ago that children were dying of AIDS and hepatitis from this American blood plasma. And he ignored it. His civil servants ignored it. And they passed the problem on to Labour and they ignored it. He had documents on his desk that were telling him. So I'll read what he says and make comments as I go. Because you've got to start thinking of this COVID now with the old folks' homes and COVID. If the story changes in the future about where it came from, if it finally comes out, or should I say, in America now, they're actually looking into it, or there's certain people looking into it in the Senate and Congress. They're looking into it where it originated. Because we are still being told somebody undercooked a bat in the Wuhan laboratory. That was a story we were told. That was a story. It was on BBC News, ITV News, Channel 4 News, Sky News. All those news outlets told us it was a bat that was undercooked in a wet food market in Wuhan, just 2 miles from the Military Institute of Research into Viruses, the Chinese laboratory, just 2 miles away. And we were told that was a coincidence. And it was somebody undercooked a bat. And nobody's told us any different. Nobody's accepting responsibility for that narrative now. But nobody's giving us a news story. Oh, don't worry where it came from. Well, this is what happened with the kids who started dying. Everybody ignored it. Everybody said, oh, don't worry about it. We'll deal with that later, why it's happening or whatever. But they never, because they had no intention of dealing with it, because they knew that there was guilt. They knew that there was wickedness involved. They knew that a disease came from America in the blood and was then put into the children. Ash, is that the tennis player? He died of a blood transfusion. He was given contaminated blood. Blood from homeless people and prisoners in prisons. Ash, some Ash. You see, lots of people died in this country, but the real scandal is the haemophiliac children. So they're still looking at it, and basically they got Lord Clark, because he's now a lord, isn't he? Because he bowed down to Boris Johnson, didn't he? He did that rebellion, but that rebellion was all about keeping us in the European Union. And then he was sent over to the Labour benches. Do you remember? He left the Tory party, or he didn't get the whip. He had the whip taken off him, so he had to go and sit on the Labour benches. And he still fought tooth and nail to keep us in the European Union. But once Brexit was achieved, he slowly built his fences again. He slowly made friends with Boris because he wanted to go in the House of Lords. Well, he's in the House of Lords. He's getting his £300 a day. He goes to the debates. He is still part of the lawmaking process of this country. This corrupt piece of shit. And he gets paid £300 a day, and he gets his fucking expenses and other stuff. Gets discount in the restaurants and the alcohol and the wine bar. So they were questioning him. Ken Clark outraged survivors of the infected blood scandal yesterday by telling an inquiry he had nothing to do with the disaster. The Tory peer insisted he was not responsible, despite being health minister when tens of thousands of Britons were infected with deadly. Right, he wasn't. The civil servants organised it, but he knew. He knew that it was badly flawed. That information came to him. He might not have initiated the deal, but he became aware as the evidence started to mount, as the evidence has been mounting and has been there about where this COVID really came from. Well, he became aware of what was happening and he ignored it. Yeah, he did have nothing to do with it. He didn't create it or bring it about, but he became aware and then he should have took action. That's his job, to take responsibility. But like I say in the title, they will not accept any responsibility. Campaigners on what is thought to be the worst NHS treatment disaster criticised his disgraceful attitude at the infected blood inquiry yesterday. When questioned over what he knew about the risk of products imported from the US, Lord Clark repeatedly insisted he had nothing to do with blood and was merely a spectator. So that means all ministers are spectators and it's a civil service. So what's the job? It's like Yes Minister, isn't it? What's his name? Jim Hacker. That programme shows that he doesn't run the department, the civil servants do. Well, that's what he's saying. Had nothing to do with him. He was a spectator. He just sat in that chair and he brought documents in and he signed them, which is what I'll talk about from my book. The peer who was health minister from 1982 to 1985 claimed the emerging controversy over contaminated blood in the early 80s hardly ever came across his desk. Hardly ever. Plain with words. It hardly ever, but it did do. If he knows it hardly ever came, what he's saying is it only came a few times across my desk. Now, in my book, I talk about the supergun. He became Home Secretary after this. And what he did was, or what happened was, Saddam Hussein ordered these pipes, technically. They were technically pipes that all slotted together. from a British company. And I think it was Forge Masters in Sheffield, because they're in the newspapers today. The government's had to buy them. Instead of letting somebody buy them off, or some hedge fund buy them, because they're completely worthless or something, or they're so out of date, the government's had to buy them because they make things for ships. And so they can't, it's not that they can't risk selling them to anybody else. Nobody will buy it. So the government are going to buy it and keep it going. But what broke Forge Masters all them years ago, turned it into a shitty company, if it is the same company, I'm sure it is. But this company in Sheffield was given this job of building these pipes, solid pipes. When I say solid, they were like great big brass pipes. And they all slotted together. And when they were on the quayside, ready to get put on a ship to be taken to Iraq, Customs and Excise seized them, because when you slotted them together, they were a super gun that could fire a shell 600 miles into Israel from Iraq. A super gun that fires a shell 600 miles. And that's what Saddam Hussein was getting from this Sheffield company. So Customs and Excise went and arrested the guys who owned this company. I think it was 3 of them. And they arrested them. And they were put in prison. And then they went for trial. And they were found guilty. But they weren't allowed to reveal evidence. They had evidence proving them innocent. But Kenneth Clarke, as Home Secretary, and the government put a D notice on their evidence that it wasn't allowed to be spoken about in court. And this evidence was that MI6, they actually told MI6, they talked about it, and they knew it was a super gun, but MI6 actually said to these 3 guys who ran this company, build the parts for the gun, because we're going to track it. So they didn't want, when I say they didn't want to do it, they had it all sorted out with MI5, MI6, that they were going to do this for Saddam Hussein, and then they were going to follow it. Well, this will have been with Mossad and the CIA and everybody. So MI5 told them to do it, but they weren't allowed to say that in court because the government put a D notice on it that they weren't allowed to speak about this. So they couldn't prove themselves innocent. So you had the Customs and Excise who were taking them to court, and you had the Secret Services who knew they were innocent, but they weren't allowed to prove they were innocent, so they were found guilty. Now, Kenneth Clarke got all the paperwork on his desk that MI5 gave them permission. And he had documents, he saw documents, but he wouldn't allow them documents to be read out in court. He wouldn't allow them to say that there were documents. So that's why they were found guilty and sentenced to prison, which screwed the company up. Now, when he finally got took to task, when they finally, it took them a couple of years to prove their innocence. But when he was finally challenged on it, do you know what he said? I don't read everything that I sign. And that is exactly what he said. I don't read every document that's put before me and I sign. So I never read that document. It might have been put in front of me. I might have signed it. But what he said was, I didn't read. I don't read every document. What's his defence here for these this blood? The peer, who was a health minister from 1982 to 85, claimed the emerging controversy over contaminated blood in the early 80s hardly ever came across his desk. He said he was too busy doing media such as BBC Radio 4 Today's programme and managing policies such as closing Victorian asylums and old geriatric hospitals. You see, he says it came across his desk, but I never saw it. And if it did come across my desk, it'll have only been a few times and I won't have taken notice of it. Which is the same when he was Home Secretary. And he said, I don't read every document that I sign. That's Kenneth Clark. That's why he's in my book. You see, they don't accept responsibility. Now, the title, The Deafening Silence, is where I went on Question Time. And they were talking about this super gun on Question Time. Dimbleby's there. He said to the audience, he says, anybody got a thought? So I put my hand up on Question Time. I'm in the audience and I put my hand up and I said, well, I'm shocked. I'm sure everybody in this audience is shocked that a government minister will let a British citizen go to prison knowing that they are innocent because it'd embarrass them for the truth to come out. So, in other words, what I'm saying is they will let you go. They will let a British citizen go to prison to save them embarrassment. So David Dimbleby said, right, he said, we'll have a vote on that. He said, does anybody support the government minister? Because he had this Tory minister who was really, really bigging it up and saying, yeah, well, no, it was needed. We needed to do it, and blah, blah, blah. You know, so what I said was, I basically said that anyone in this audience can go to prison innocently, be innocent and go to prison to save the government embarrassment. So David Dimbleby, how many people support the government minister and what he said? Now, there was Tories in the audience. There was about 250 people in the audience in Oxford Road, BBC Oxford Road in Manchester. Not one person put their hand up. Not one. And that was the deafening silence. And it destroyed that bloke. You actually saw him change colour. He made a joke and he went, because he's just spoke in support of his government, his fellow minister. And he said, oh, it's a storm in a teacup. And he's got, it's nothing, it's this, it's that. Well, 250 British people just stared at him like that. Not one person put their hand up in support. Not one. Which is saying that we know you're lying. 250 Tories, some of them. What that silence, that deafening silence is saying to that government minister is, we know you're a liar. We know Kenneth Clark is a liar. We know that you don't care about the British people. We know that he doesn't care about the British people. They only care about the jobs and the power. And they do everything they can to stop the truth coming out. And that's what this blood is about, this haemophiliac thing. And even now, 40 odd years after, he's not accepting responsibility. And he's quite annoyed that people are thinking that he is in some way responsible. He's very annoyed about it. It's not my fault, says ex-minister Ken. Clive Smith, chairman of the Haemophiliac Society, said Lord Clark's long-awaited evidence to the infected blood inquiry was an opportunity to show contrition or remorse. Well, he never showed remorse over the supergun and those men going to jail, being found guilty in the High Court, the biggest court in the land. He never shown any remorse. He said, I don't read everything that comes on my, every document that comes on my desk that I sign. Show contrition or remorse for the terrible NHS treatment catastrophe which devastated so many lives, which he was when he was health minister. That's the same NHS that just got the George Cross. Instead, he has treated the inquiry and its participants with disdain by showing a shocking lack of knowledge and quibbling over the relevance of questions. Those infected and affected by the contaminated blood scandal deserve better. Arthur Ashe, was it Arthur Ashe? Might have been Arthur Ashe, the tennis player. He died of contaminated blood. He won Wimbledon. That's when a lot of it came out, because he had money behind him. He had powerful lawyers for his family. And for when he was dying, he was ill. and they tracked where he got AIDS from because he wasn't gay. Lord Clark, who was Health Secretary from 1988 to 1990, was speaking on the first day of the week of evidence to the inquiry. Instead of expressing his sympathy for the lives destroyed by the scandal, he angrily objected to questions and spoke of how he'd been left exasperated by those seeking to attribute blame. Well, in my book, I talk about Jeff Hoon, the Defence Secretary for Labour, when we invaded Iraq. And Jeff Hoon had a document on his desk for 6 months with all the equipment that the British Army would need to invade Iraq. And he had a list of equipment that they needed to buy. And what he did was he put that document to the side and he wouldn't sign it. So that when the British troops went into Iraq, this equipment that had been on his desk, this list, nobody fucking bought it. So the British Army went into Iraq with boots that weren't for the desert, and they went in with not enough body armour and lots of other things. The Land Rovers they had from Northern Ireland, they sold them. They had to go and buy them back and then paint them in army desert colours. They sold all the Land Rovers that they had in Northern Ireland, then they had to go and buy them back. But it's the body armour that I write about. And Sergeant Roberts, Steve Roberts, in the first couple of days invading Iraq, he got shot. It was actually friendly fire, and he got shot in the chest. Friendly fire. But he didn't have any body armour on because his officer told him to give, because he was in the rear action. His officer ordered him to take off his jacket, his flak jacket, his body armour, and give it to a soldier who was going to be further up the front. So when this friendly fire action took place and he got shot in the chest, the back, he had no body armour on because he'd give it to another soldier because there wasn't enough body armour to go around. Well, that was Jeff Hoon not signing the document. Now, I wrote about that in 2005. I wrote about Jeff Hoon and this lack of contrition, this lack of acknowledgement, this deception, this deceit. Now, eventually, his widow and a couple of others, and the father of the young lad that was killed in the police station, his name's just gone out of my head for a minute, but Sergeant Roberts' wife and a few others, they got to see Jeff Hoon about these issues. And they were saying to him, why didn't you provide the body armour? You had the document on your desk for 6 months and you wouldn't sign it. Because to sign it meant they would have to admit that they were planning to go into Iraq 6 months before, a year before. It wasn't just something that's happened and it's like it's led up to it. No, it was all planned. Saddam Hussein couldn't get out of it. He couldn't apologize. He couldn't say, well, I'll do this, I'll do that. Because they were determined to go to war. But they couldn't buy the equipment for a war because then they'd have to admit they were going to war. So he only signed that document in the days before war. Well, it was too late for the equipment. It was too late for Sergeant Roberts. Anyway, his widow got to meet him and some others who had issues. And Jeff Hoon, I write in my book, like Kenneth Clark got exasperated with the questions and the people and their lack of understanding, that they don't understand it's not his fault. Well, that's what happened with Jeff Hoon, and that's what I write about in my book. He actually said, I'm getting quite irritated with you people, you just don't understand. He said that to the widow of Sergeant Roberts. He basically said, shut the fuck up. Don't you know who I am? Lord Clark appeared to become irritated by the meticulous questioning from lead counsel Jenny Richards QC branding it pointless and irrelevant. After heated exchanges, inquiry chairman Sir Brian Langford intervened to state the relevance was not for him to determine. Even the fucking judge got pissed off with him. I'm telling you now, they will never ever accept responsibility. And everything that happened with the blood 40 odd years ago, everything that happened with the lack of equipment for the British soldiers, the lies that got us into Iraq, Tony Blair, Alistair Campbell, Jeff Hoon, they will never, ever, ever accept responsibility.